This is an exclusive presentation of WOWO 1190 AM and 107.5 FM, Unholstered.
We are back. It's another edition of Unholstered. My name is Kayla Blakesley. I am just one of your hosts here on Unholstered.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sophia Rosales-Scatina. I'm a captain with the Fort Wayne Police Department, and welcome back to the show Unholstered.
Sophia, it's official. We have been doing this show now for over 2 years. I cannot believe it.
I know.
Time flies.
It does, and we didn't think we'd have enough topics.
I know, and you know what? I just just for folks who maybe just tuned in or they're just getting familiar with the show Unholstered, this show was born out of just pure frustration. Back in 2021, I got tired of all of this rhetoric around law enforcement that was so negative, and all of this defund the police rhetoric. It just really got on my nerves. And I don't even, full disclosure, have a family member in law enforcement. My husband's not in law enforcement. It's not anything like that, but yet I still was just taking it so personal. And Sophia, I never actually met you in person. But you used to be the public information officer with the Fort Wayne Police Department here in town. So we had spoken numerous times, but never, over the phone or email. Yeah. Never actually met in person. So I called up Sophia. It's like, hey, I have this really crazy idea for a podcast. What do you think? Are you in? And Sophia said,
I'm in. I'm all about the crazy.
Yeah. So we sat down. I said my one concern was just having enough topics weekend after weekend after weekend. And here we are. Yeah. 2 years in, and we're still going strong.
I think over 90 topics now.
Yeah, it's got to be. Yeah, we've had over, I believe, 90 podcasts at this point, which really it's quite easy, I think, to come up with topics because the news practically does it for us day in and day out. Because if you are new to this program, we share and tell and talk about all things law enforcement, and not even necessarily just here in Northeast Indiana, but it could be stories around our region, across the country, and that's kind of where we are headed into today. We're actually going to be talking about a story out of Illinois. But before we get to that, Sophia, and I think listeners will be very interested in this story, let's put it that way, especially since it's our neighbors north of us. But I wanted to have you recap last Tuesday night. It was your National Night Out.
Yes, it was. It was our second one. We revisited and brought that back. It had been dormant for a long time.
When was the first one?
It was last year.
Oh, last year was the first one. Okay.
Yeah, we hadn't. It had been dormant for us for probably 30 years. We had not participated. But we wanted to bring that program back because we thought it was important to what we were doing here in the community. And it just kind of coincided with our message that we like to go on, that the police and the community are one. And so we did that last year, and it was a good turnout, good successful turnout. And the whole program was really, really well run. And this year, it was just really nice. Officer Woods put together a really good program, and I helped her where I needed to. But honestly, she had it nailed down, and I just had to do some final tweaking on some stuff and make some contacts where she didn't have those. But it was a really good event, attended well.
Where is it?
It was at Fryman Square, and we handed out close to 500 backpacks and school supplies to area kids that were in need. What
a great opportunity. Kind of like you said, this is really where the community and law enforcement can kind of come together. And I know, as I mentioned at the beginning, sometimes people have misconceptions about not even just police officers here in town, but across the country. So what a great opportunity for you guys to be able to help out some area kiddos with back to school supplies. And in the meantime, get to meet mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles.
Yep.
And hopefully, start up really important conversations and just be like, hey, here, we are a friend of you. We are a friend of the community. I think it's a really great program.
Yeah. And the weather held out. It cooled off for us this whole past week.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness you weren't standing
90s.
Out there in heat
last year was really
105.
hot. So I was happy with the nice weather we've had this whole week.
Well, I'm really glad it went well. Unfortunately, we have to change the topic on something that's not quite as lighthearted, let's put it that way. And so to be honest, full transparency, Sophia, I sent you this story about Illinois now allowing non-U.S. citizens to become police officers. Now, again, in full transparency, Sophia, I send you this article. I'm so excited about this topic. And then I myself didn't even read it. I'm terrible. I'm a terrible person. I did not prep properly for this show simply because I just ran out of time. However, I have an idea, I'm sure, of where this story is going because this is something that has been pursued for quite some time, but it does feel like everyone kind of turned their back, and Illinois' governor just kind of stuck this law through that, again, essentially non-citizens can arrest citizens. of Illinois, of American citizens living in Illinois. I mean, that's really what it is in a nutshell. And what I thought I would do is read some of this bill. This is Illinois House Bill 3751. And it says, the bill provides that an individual who is not a citizen but is legally authorized to work in the United States under federal law is authorized to apply for the position of police officer, subject to all requirements and limitations other than citizenship, to which other applicants are subject. Adding that non-U.S. citizens must be able to obtain, carry, purchase, or otherwise possess a firearm under federal law to apply for the job. So that is a direct reading from House Bill 3751. I could think the obvious question here, Sophia, is why is this a bad idea?
I'm actually stunned. When you sent me this, I had no idea that this was what it was going to be. But when you open it up and start reading, I'm like, I can think of a lot of areas that this is bad, and just from the premise and just my automatic thinking, illegal. As when I took the oath of my office then to protect the Constitution, I did so as an American citizen. I don't know how you can say you'll enforce the Constitution of this land when you're exploiting the Constitution of this land or illegally here. And I don't even know how you would get even a license to carry a handgun, because
that's my other question. I was going to ask you, how does
even on the
work?
constitutional carry, it does not apply to people here who have illegal immigration status.
So they would essentially be a prohibited person.
They
from
would be a
carrying
prohibited
firearm.
person. So I'm not even quite sure how they could legally possess a firearm. Now, it's so woefully, there's so many things here. In my mind, I'm churning, and I'm trying to find words to kind of put together my thoughts on this. Overall, I think it's just a bad idea. You can hear people exclaim in the article that, you're here in an illegal status because, let's face it, you're not, you have not even had a hearing. And I'm just assuming that they're just any person that's crossed the border. It doesn't say specifically who they're talking about. I know in here they talked about DACA.
Well, so I should say this. The bill goes on to say immigrants who remain in the country under the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, are also entitled to apply for positions to join law enforcement. That according directly to the bill.
Yeah, so I'm not even quite sure how they would even pass, the federal standard to even purchase a handgun without a legal status here in the United States. Now, I am not, someone that's well versed in the whole DACA thing, so I don't know exactly what their status is or what the government has given or not given them throughout their, time here in the United States. But I know that a lot of them can't even apply for in-state tuition because they're not a legal resident, technically. Right. So if you're not a legal resident of a state, how can you actually garner a permit, even on a constitutional basis? Because I know our law prohibits that, our constitutional carry law, because we just talked about that on the last show. So there's I have a lot of questions.
I do too. I wish we could get the governor of Illinois on the show. I think this is interesting too. The Fraternal Order of Police, they issued a statement about this to ABC 20. Again, this is in Illinois. Basically condemning the bill as well. They said, and I quote, "What message does this legislation send when it allows people who do not have legal status to become the enforcers of our laws? This is a potential crisis of confidence in law enforcement at a time when our officers need all the public confidence they can get." Sophia, I could not agree with that more. And maybe that's the point. Yeah.
Maybe that's the whole point of the bill. They're already using the cashless bail. They've implemented that. That just went through the Supreme Court of Illinois, and they've upheld the constitutionality of that. So they'll be going to cashless bail. The first state in the nation to do that, completely
Illinois,
cashless
that's right.
bail.
They tried to make that a thing already before too, right?
They did, but then it got held up in court. Someone objected. The lower court found it unconstitutional, so it made its way to the Supreme Court of Illinois, and they just ruled that constitutional, I think, July 18th. So that will be implemented here. I think today they were starting that. Then cashless bail, I think it started today on August 1st, or Tuesday on August 1st.
It just doesn't seem right to me that someone who is actively breaking the law, and this in terms of the Fraternal Order of Police, then now being the ones who are going to, quote, enforce the law.
Yeah. And I get that.
That upsets me.
There's people that are like, well, they're not really breaking the law, they're just running. But they are. If they've crossed the border without legally stopping and doing what they needed to do to be let in this country in a legal process way, then yes, it is contrary to our laws
right, that's
that govern
to me
this
when
nation.
people are like, smoking marijuana here in Indiana. I'm like, oh, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
But I'm like, no, but technically you are breaking the law.
Right.
I don't care which way you cut it.
Yeah. And, there could be stories like, oh, well, this and there's that. It doesn't matter. They take the emotion out of it. What does the law say? And the law says unless you are going through the legal process and legal channels, that you are not a part of our country. But we've had hundreds of thousands of people cross the border. And I don't know to what end. Like, how many more people can we take?
Yeah.
Because these border towns and these border states are struggling. I mean, I watch the news and I read articles, law enforcement articles. I have friends on CBP, and they're telling me they're struggling. These men and women are working countless hours, and they're babysitters.
Yeah.
They're babysitters and not doing what they should be doing to protect our borders, and that's what they were hired to do.
Not to mention, speaking of just the law in general, it is federal law currently that non-U.S. citizens cannot serve as police officers or deputies.
Right. So there's so many things wrong with this, and I don't know how this will stand up in court at all. But I think maybe that's the point. They're just trying to undermine law enforcement. I mean, it is Illinois. And I find, anything that comes out of Illinois is basically... And I shouldn't say all of Illinois. There are some parts of Illinois that are very righteous in what they do, and probably have leanings pro law enforcement. But then they're overridden by, the large city of Chicago and the way Chicago does business. So I think this is probably the point. And I don't know. There's so many theories out there when it comes to illegal immigration on why we're allowing so many people into our country at the detriment to our citizens.
The governor of Illinois, he did come out defending this bill and also issued a statement because he's been getting a lot of slack for it after recently signing into law, as he should be. But he said in a press conference earlier this week, I believe it was on Monday, he argued that the legislation would be limited to individuals who are legally allowed to work in the United States and who are legally allowed to possess firearms. As for all the criticism, he said he said Republicans, his words, not mine, are misinterpreting the language of the bill. But
if you're here illegally in the United States,
you can't legally possess a firearm.
You can't possess a firearm. So I'm not quite sure who he means. I wish they'd be more specific in what they're kind of detailing here. So for me, I have a lot of questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, you and me both. I think we'll try to do our best over the next couple of weeks to get some of those answers, questions to those answers as we start to learn more. I would be curious, Sophia, let's say something like that was brought to the state of Indiana, right? And because let's face it, so here's one way I could look at this, I suppose, right? I'm trying to get into the head of Illinois here, or Illinois' governor. Recruitment is low for police. We know that. Right? Nobody wants to be police officers these days, right? And I get it, especially after all the rhetoric we just mentioned and the verbal bashings that officers have been taking for the last couple of years. So I don't know, maybe he's looking at this as a recruitment opportunity, I don't know, to fill staff. But so let's just go out on a limb here and say this were to happen in Indiana as well, right? How do you feel like that would be received amongst your team, your peers, or other just law enforcement departments in general across the state?
I don't think it'd be well received no matter where you are and what city you are in. Because our whole job, our whole reason we exist is to uphold laws that are legally brought before us, to us, through the Indiana Code. And even federal laws, sometimes we have to, create the channels to shuffle people over to the federal side and call in federal agents for federal stuff. But it always starts with us. We start the process. So I don't think it would go over well. I don't see it. There's a whole idea of language, culture, customs. There's a whole gamut of things that if you are not well versed in American culture, the language, English, we're always looking for Spanish-speaking officers because we have to deal with a large Spanish-speaking population here in Fort Wayne. We also have one of the largest Burmese settlements in the entire nation, so we're always looking for people with languages, but your first command of the language has to be English, and it has to be very good English. It cannot be sporadic. It cannot be, I don't know some words, because if someone doesn't understand you, as we've found out with people in other languages, it could turn deadly. And that's the last thing we need.
Do you speak any other languages?
I speak some Spanish. Yeah. It's not as good as it used to be just because I don't do it very often anymore. But, it's one of those things where we have to be aware and cognizant that we need bilingual people, but the first command of the language has to be English because that's primarily what we deal with.
And is there a part of you that, because I struggle with this in other areas, not with law enforcement, but it's like, I followed the rules. I did everything right to get where I'm at in terms of your position, Sophia. You're a captain with the Fort Wayne Police Department. I mean, does a part of you feel a little slighted about that? Would you, I suppose?
I do. And I feel, honestly, it brings up the topic when you talk about doing everything right. It kind of brings up the topic about drug use for me. Because, what we allow now is vastly different than what we allowed when I got on. And, to say we are going to allow experimental use, but you have to be within, so many years or whatever. And I'm like, but what do you tell the person that's done everything right? What do you do? What do you tell the person who's towed the line, who's been, within, the boundaries of the law? What do you tell them? That doesn't matter. It does matter. It's part of your integrity and who you are. So I always kind of, no matter what it is, if you're doing the right thing, I think you should be rewarded with a job.
Yeah, I do too.
Especially enforcing laws.
Especially enforcing laws. Yeah, you want someone with that kind of track record.
People have to be perfect because they do not. And sometimes, those experiences bring with you a certain kind of view or empathy for certain situations that is much needed. But at the same time, again, I struggle because it's like, what do you tell someone who's just done everything right?
Well, I view that the same way with student loans. For me, when there was talk about bailing out hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans, I paid mine off about 3 or 4 years ago, and I didn't expect anyone else to pay off the student loan debt that I incurred on my own. Even when I got married, I remember saying to my husband, like, we can keep this separate because this is mine. And of course, my husband's like, nope, what's yours is mine is ours. Nice. I was fortunate that he had that kind of mentality, but I didn't expect him to. I didn't expect anyone. So, I paid off all of my student loan debt, and it was hard. It was brutal. It was terrible, but I did it. And I actually felt quite accomplished after doing it. My husband and I, we went out and celebrated because that's how pumped we were about it. Yeah. But then you hear this student loan bailout program, or I call it transfer program, which we don't need to get into that. But that's how I view it too. And I'm like, well, what about the rest of us who worked so hard, picked up extra shifts, and I worked at Mad Mex overnight, banqueting, drunken frats to make extra money. That's really infuriating to me.
Yeah. I chose a school that I could afford. My parents didn't save any money for that. So I went to PFW, which was IPFW at the time. I got my degree. It's on the IU side. I played tennis, got some scholarship money for that. I worked my way through college and I took out loans. I had some grants. I paid that all back, but I went somewhere I could afford. I knew I couldn't afford to go to IU or Purdue or anywhere else. So I chose the university here. And,
So what do you say to the law enforcement officer who had to go through the pathways to gain legal citizenship, right?
Yeah, because we have had them. We have had officers who were not born in this country, but they became citizens before they became officers.
Right,
and they had to get their
the
citizenship before. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what you would tell them.
I will say this. Lawsuits have already been filed, which, as you mentioned, you assumed would happen. And sure enough, they've already been filed to challenge the law. The Thomas More Society is a nonprofit law firm. They're actually suing the state of Illinois over this. So, this story just coming to light, like I said, we'll get more answers to a lot of these questions and obviously learn more over the days and weeks ahead. But just looking at it right now from a very narrow lens, because like I said, I didn't even read half this article even after I sent it to you, just fundamentally seems like a really bad idea.
Yeah. And especially, all this talk when we talk about police reform has been, we want our officers highly educated. We want them, to be able to deal with different cultures and different ethnicities and all these kinds of things. And they want training and all this stuff. And I look in terms of, because most of our immigrants that are coming here, crossing the border at this time, are coming from South America. I'll just say what it is. They are mostly Hispanic, Spanish-speaking Latinos coming across. And I don't know how you teach our culture or even dealing with other ethnicities that they have no concept of. I don't know that there's a big Burmese population in South America. I don't know that there's a big Asian population, but in here, and we've grown up, it's just we're just accustomed to that here. Is it in every community? No. But for the most part, we like to get our officers here from our community. We like our police department to look like our community. But it's up to the community to actually put applications in. So on one hand, I'm like, well, if no one here is going to put in for the job, someone has to do it. But on the other hand, I'm like, there's no way.
I get that, though. I love that, what you just said, though, about, having a preference, I guess you could say, of officers being from our community. But I think that's a good thing, because with that also comes a sense of pride and ownership. I live here. I work here. My kids go to school here. I go to this grocery store down the street. As an officer, I feel like when you have part of that ownership, right? I mean, and your job is
you have buy-in.
Yeah, you have buy-in to that.
Yeah. And it's important.
It's so important. And I can't imagine, and I'm not saying they can't, but an extreme buy-in, even from someone from, I don't know, Washington, D.C. coming here, are they going to have that extreme buy-in? Probably not.
Yeah, and they're not going to know our community and the nuances that we have as a community. And it's not to saying they can't, because we've had some really good people from other areas come in here and do a fine job policing. But if we're talking about numbers and statistics, a greater amount of people from this community apply and get the job, and they do really good things here because this is their home. This is where they've grown up. I mean, this is where I grew up. My parents moved here. They love this community. We stayed. I stayed. I didn't move. I didn't go somewhere else. I love my community. I love Fort Wayne. I love the growth that it's experiencing. I love the diversity. I love the culture differences. I just love everything about Fort Wayne. And I love its proximity to bigger places if I choose. But if I wanted to live somewhere else, I would. I could.
Exactly.
But I don't. I love this community.
I share that wholeheartedly. And I am a transplant.
Yeah.
I moved here from Pennsylvania back in 2011. So what? It's been 12 years now? It's been a long time now that I've been in Fort Wayne. I'm just like you. If I wanted to go somewhere else or make a lateral move, I would. But I don't, because I'm just like you. I love this community wholeheartedly. However, even when I first moved here, was I ingrained in this community? Absolutely not. I wasn't born and raised here. I didn't go to elementary school here. I don't have all of my friends that I grew up with here. I didn't go to this grocery store down the street growing up and have fond memories of it. You know, I don't have that here. Yeah. And that's real as well. People talk about it all the time. Working at WOWO, just the legends that came out of WOWO. I'm like, oh man, I wish I didn't grow up with them. I didn't grow up listening to School Delays like everybody else did, know? Yeah. So there really is something to be said about that ownership if you are from the community. But that's interesting. So you said most of your recruits are from the area then? Yeah, they're just people here that have grown up here and they want to police their community, which is what we want. We want people that know this community, that have contacts in this community, who have people that trust them in this community. And that's what policing is establishing relationships built on trust. And if you already have that established trust with people, when you become an officer, hopefully you keep that. On that note, if we need to fill some seats and folks are listening, they're like, we don't want to be like Illinois, and someone wants to be a police officer, how can they go about applying for that, Sophia? Yeah, so you can go to fwpd.org. And you can go to the we're hiring. Now, our application process will not start again until next year. We're currently in a process right now. Testing phase is underway. We've already had our written test and we're getting ready to have our physical agility test. So we do the same time. It's usually from February until the end of March usually is when we're open for applications. And you can do that all online, or you can text one of our recruiters as well. And you can do that just by texting JOIN FWPD, like it's all one word, JOIN FWPD to 260-233-9850. 260-233-9850. Who knew that this would turn into talking about recruitment today, Sophia? But it worked out. It is important. Yeah. It's really important, especially when we see things like this happening in Illinois, because so many, and I hate to just say red and blue, but I'm going to just say it. A lot of other blue states are watching Illinois. They're watching to see how this goes. They're watching to see what happens. So you best bet I'm going to keep watching to see what happens in Illinois. And as we've mentioned, try and get a lot more answers to all of these questions that we have, particularly how you are able to legally carry a firearm when you're not a legal citizen. I'm just baffled by that. Sophia, speaking of carrying firearms, we updated folks on constitutional carry here in Indiana last week on Unholstered. If you missed that, you can go download the Unholstered podcast anywhere you can download a podcast. But we still have so many questions. People kind of still rolling in with some confusion about it, and I understand it is very confusing. I know you guys have even mentioned, hey, we had to wrap our heads around this law when it was enforced July 1, 2022. But, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but with the passage of this law, Indiana being a constitutional carry state here, you no longer need a handgun permit to legally carry.
Correct.
Okay. Let me say it again for people in the back. You no longer need a handgun permit to legally carry now in the state of Indiana.
As long as you're not a prohibited person.
As long as you're not a prohibited person. How do you find that out? That's when you do apply for a permit if you want to find out if you are a prohibited person.
Yeah, if you've had any involvement with police as a juvenile or as a young adult, you'd best just get the check, and they're free. Gun permits are free. You just come down, grab it, and get the check. Better be safe than sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to issue that clarification here. And again, if you still have more questions or you're still not sure, revisit our episode from last week, Constitutional Carry 1 year later. Again, just search for the Unholstered podcast anywhere you download a podcast. Your town, your team, your topics. This is Unholstered.
Thanks for listening to Unholstered. Be sure to subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen. And remember, you can listen every Saturday morning at 10:30 on WOWO 1190 and 107.5 FM.
Podcasts by Federated Media.